and change his mind about coming back and machine gunning us a second time. I don't know if you're interested, but in 2010, my dear sweet wife and I, my daughter and son-in-law went to Pearl Harbor for that 69th anniversary. After attending the memorial services and the rededication of the visitor center that morning, we boarded that first white boat, went out aboard the USS Arizona Memorial. Standing there on the deck of that memorial, look over the side, the hull of that vessel resting there on the bottom of the harbor, and all those names listed there on the honor wall, and know that those are the names of 1,177 crew members who went down with the ship, whose earthly remains are still down there, still aboard that vessel over which we were then standing. Oh, my feelings that day were so much different than they were that long ago Sunday morning when I saw it explode and burn for some time thereafterward, then resting there on the bottom of the harbor each time we passed by on the Liberty boat going to or from Ford Island. The following day, in the accompaniment of a naval historian, which had been arranged with the help of I can't think of his name right now. He's a retired Major General, and he was able to put us in contact with people in charge there at Pearl, and they said, when he gets here, have him contact us, and we'll take him anywhere he wants to go. So when I got there, this naval historian took us on to Ford Island, and we stopped by the USS Utah Memorial, paid our respects, honor, and remembrance to all those crew members still aboard that vessel. Then around to the harbor inland end of the island where the old PBY twin-engine Catalina flying boat patrol squadrons were stationed. I got once again to stand on the very spot where that first bomb fell that morning. Standing there and close your eyes, it was almost like the whole thing was happening all over again. I thought I better get away from here. So I asked that historian, could we go inside of building 54? He said, well, let's go try. It's highly restricted. Luckily, the door was slightly open. There was a work detail working in there. He was able to get the attention of the chief petty officer that was in charge of the detail, and somehow he convinced him to let us inside the hangar. I really wanted to get back up in that office that I was in when that first bomb fell, but that's all closed off. They wouldn't let us go up there. But I went to my duty station there in that hangar that morning. I was a 17-year-old naive sailor boy trying to be the very, very best military man that I could be. But by the time that day was over, I felt more like about a 34-year-old combat vet, if you know what I mean. Something like that. Those guys of you who have experienced it, something like that can rob you of your youth very, very quickly. I lost that 17-year-old sailor boy there that morning, and I never, ever again found him. When we left the hangar, I asked him, I said, could we go around the backside of the hangar? He said, sure. So as we walked around what would be the east or the end of the hangar, I was able to point out the window pane. It's a lighter color than the old one, that those bomb fragments, machine gun bullets, or whatever it was, would have to come through to get to me. When we got around the backside of the hangar, of course, he's going through his spiel about what happened there that long ago Sunday morning. I'm looking around, trying to see some signs of that construction ditch, you know. And finally he looked at me and said, what are you looking for anyway? I said, I'm looking for some signs of that construction ditch that was out here somewhere that we were ordered into and then threatened with military discipline when we left to go put up a defense. He said, wait a minute. Tell me that again. There's something really, really funny here. And so I told him exactly what happened to me, and I'm thinking he's disbelieving me, so I told him, and sir, what I'm telling you is the honest to God's truth. I'll swear to it on a stack of Bibles, Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, Pearl of Great Price, Articles of Faith, Words of Wisdom, and on my dead mother's grave. He said, oh, no. Yeah. He said, oh, no, I believe every word you're telling me. But he said, what's funny, of all the people I've talked to who were here that morning, some of them a number of times, you're only the second person to ever mention that ditch. He said the first guy was just yesterday, and he was in VP-24. And I said, well, VP-24 had the westerly end of Building 54 as their hangar. We had the easterly, 23 had the easterly half of the hangar. Well, I'll tell you what, if I had stayed in that ditch as I was ordered there to do that morning, if I had not disobeyed that direct military order to get back in that ditch, if I had not went and got that machine gun and put up what defense I could there on that end of the island, then I would not be sitting here proudly before you today and sharing that information with you.
Chuck, thank you. You know, I said earlier that history isn't just from the books, but you've just heard an amazing story in real time from someone who was there.
Do I have time to share a memoriam that I wrote to my thinking?
I think so. Sure. Yeah, I think so.
When we went back to Pearl Harbor, that was the first time I'd been back there in 64 years. When I stood there on that deck or there where that first bomb fell, my feelings were so much different than they were that long ago Sunday morning. Even though I was only 17 years old, I was able to accept what was going on there as the waste of war. That's what happens in wartime. You lose men, you lose equipment, but hopefully, you know, in the long run, you will come out all right. Anyway, when we got home from that, my dear sweet wife said, "What?" You know, so I got to thinking about it. And we might be sitting at a table. I'd push the meal aside, start writing on it, because I knew if I didn't write it down, it would be here today, gone tomorrow. You know, it's us old folks that works that way with us. Anyway, or I might be out in the backyard of my small shop working. By the way, I still work. I provide a specialty service to a construction company. This past April 2nd was a double anniversary date for me. On that day, it had been 76 years since I joined the Navy. Also on that day, I had been a working, wage-earning, tax-paying, service-providing, productive, contributing, and self-supporting member of my generation for 76 consecutive years, and I still work. Anyway, it was no time at all, and I had wads of those things, and I thought if I don't get them together and get it correlated, it won't mean anything to anybody. So for me, it always works better if I put it in a group of verses rather than a paragraph after paragraph storyline. This is what I came up with, and I'm going to share it with you. Those of you who have been to Pearl Harbor, listen, see if it reminds you of what you saw and what you were bound to feel while you were there. Those of you who have not yet went, I encourage you to go at your earliest possible opportunity. And if you'll remember what we say and do here today, maybe it will help to prepare you for what you will see and what you're bound to feel while you were there. I've called it a tour of remembrance. From within those rusting hulls of sunken ships, reminders of what used to be, echo calls to remember from those there entombed that freedom is never free. For those who've answered duty's call in the air, on land, or at sea, where liberties and freedoms come under threat, that's where you choose to be. You've all gave some, and some gave all, those liberties and freedoms to save, but those valued treasures can only remain if protected by the gallant and the brave. The bombs blast, the cannons roar, the sights and sounds of battle, the cries of the wounded, the sighs of the dying, amid bursts of machine gun rattle, the fires, flames, the burning airplanes, the sight of sinking ships, with death raining from the skies right before our eyes. How could we ever forget? Some man guns put up a fight of victory hoped to gain. They stood their ground. Then many with their ships went down, and down there they shall forever remain. Those shipmates and buddies, forever they're lost, never to breathe air again, must always be honored and forever remembered, or their sacrifices will have been in vain. Some saw it all, got involved, many in their own way, and for those who did and still survived, it's like only yesterday. We've grown old, tried to move on, things we've tried to forget, but try as we will, those memories linger still, and for some, it's not over yet. Our seasons pass, the time draws near, the last survivors will have faded from sight. Then comes each following 7th of December. Will there always be those who will care enough not only to remember, but to remember and then go to the top of Mount Diablo on that night and light the light? By the way, I want to remind you, we will light that light at 5 o'clock tonight. It will shine until sunrise in the morning. Find yourselves a vantage point from where you can see the top of Mount Diablo. If you will stand and watch that beacon as it rotates and sends its brighter and broader beam of remembrance out across all the valleys below, if you will put yourselves in the right frame of mind, and if you will listen very, very carefully, not only with your ears, but with grateful hearts and respectful minds, then all of those people who down through the years in any war, everywhere, who have stepped forward, donned the uniform, put their life on the line, gave their life to provide, protect, and preserve our liberties and our freedom, they will communicate with you, and they will do so in one voice, as if with one voice. And their message, their plea, will always be the same. Remember us. Remember us. We gave our lives while in service to you.
Thank you. Chuck Kohler,